The family of a woman and baby shot dead by her partner in a murder-suicide outside Alice Springs say they want her death to be the impetus for change. Aboriginal politicians from Labor and the Coalition have also spoken out about the scourge of domestic violence plaguing Indigenous communities. And a warning, this story contains the names and images of Indigenous people who have died that have been used with their families' permission.
About 2 months ago, an incident of unimaginable terror took place on this property about 25 kilometres north of Alice Springs. A woman and her infant son shot dead by the woman's violent partner. It's a sort of incident that would make front page news if it happened in one of our major cities, but few Australians would have any idea of the terror that took place here on July 17.
We don't want her death to be just another Aboriginal woman that died. We want her death to be her story to be heard.
A loving mother and a kind and happy person who is always there for her family. As he visits her grave in Alice Springs, that's how Mark Lockyer wants his niece, Alena Kukla, or AK, to be remembered.
For me, it's carrying her when she was a baby, carrying her around like the sort of baby she was, like the little girl. That's what I remember the most, her being a little girl.
Mark says AK and her partner had been drinking on the day of her death. They drove to this property with their baby Orlando and AK's 3-year-old son, one of 2 children from a previous relationship.
The 3-year-old was at the property at the time, so he witnessed it. And he went and told other people in the property that his mummy was laying on the floor. He's really too young to comprehend or fully understand. He no longer has his mum.
The family says the perpetrator was on bail at the time, awaiting trial over an act of violence allegedly committed against a former partner.
I think the court should have done more to protect her and the baby. I think if he was going to court for domestic violence previously, and that maybe if he would have got locked up, she would still be alive.
Hundreds of people attended AK and Orlando's funeral, the incident devastating the tight-knit Alice Springs community.
She was our family. She was my niece. She was my dad's granddaughter. She was a sister. She was a mum. You know, she's somebody. And that her life was cut short because a man wanted to be controlling and take control of her life and tell her what she could and can't do.
AK and her son are sadly not the only domestic violence victims buried behind these gates. In 2016, following an inquest into the deaths of 2 women beaten to death by their partners at Alice Springs town camps, the coroner Greg Kavanagh described domestic violence as a contagion and said that in the Northern Territory's Aboriginal communities, it was literally out of control. And the problem is getting worse. In 2018, there were just over 3,000 domestic violence victims in the Northern Territory. By 2021, that number had grown to almost 6,000.
These domestic violence cases are getting more and more violent. And when I say more and more violent, they're no longer people are getting a punch in the face, they're actually dying.
Alice Springs councillor Michael Little works with Aboriginal men struggling to walk between their traditional Indigenous culture and the white man's world. He says he's worried about a growing number of people lost in the middle who turn to alcohol and violence.
You've got to question why is there so much anger in these people? What makes their mind enforce so much violence?
Country Liberal Party Senator Jacinta Price gained prominence in 2016 when she spoke about domestic violence at the National Press Club. There was a brief national focus on the domestic violence suffered by Aboriginal women, but the news cycle soon moved on.
Nobody cares in this country, or those that do care are told that they're racist if they care for the fact that Indigenous women suffer, Indigenous children suffer, and even Indigenous men suffer hugely as a result of black-on-black violence. It's the #1 cause that leads to the high rates of incarceration for Indigenous Australia.
Like Senator Price, Labor's new MP for the Northern Territory seat of Lingiari, Marion Scrimgeour, raised the issue in her first speech in Parliament.
I'm sick to death of watching these women become you know, just faceless statistics. We can't keep ignoring this problem, and at the heart of a lot of that is alcohol and drugs.
Mark Lockyer simply hopes his niece will be remembered and that her death might spark the impetus for change.
I don't want this to happen to another Indigenous woman and her baby. If something can come out of this that protects women and children, then that's what the government needs to do, that's what the community needs to do. We need to protect the most vulnerable people in the community.
Matt Cunningham, Sky News, Alice Springs.
If this story has raised any concerns for you, you can contact the Domestic Violence Helpline on 1800 RESPECT.